Amazing, amazing. And we are waiting on our 6A. We can get started. I'm just going to double check. I'm searching for the moderator. Give me one moment. If the moderator does not show, don't worry. I will introduce you all.
You can access breakout rooms. Why is the recording here? Okay. You should be able to access the breakout rooms at the bottom of your Zoom panel. If you can't find them, please do let me know. But the sessions are happening in the breakout rooms. This is the main room. This is not a session room. Sessions are happening in the breakout rooms. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to kick us off here and get us started. So here we go. Welcome to World Futures Day. This session is brought to you by Teach the Future, a global nonprofit dedicated to embedding futures literacy in education worldwide. World Futures Day is a partnership with the Millennium Project. And right now, we are all part of a 24-hour global conversation about our futures, creating a space where all generations, especially young voices, can share their visions, concerns, and action-driven projects towards a better tomorrow. So let's make this conversation count. You can find facilitator bios on the event page. With that, facilitators, please take it away.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Our session From Play to Policy, Turning Everyday Experiences into Future Ready Systems, is really about one central idea. The future is not something abstract or distant, it is shaped by ordinary choices we make every single day, whether it is how we manage waste, how we design cities, how we raise children, or how we interact with nature, or even how we build empathy through animals. These everyday experiences slowly become systems, and those systems define our future. So today, instead of just identifying problems, we're asking a deeper question: how do we redesign everyday life so that sustainable and conscious choices become the default? Let's begin. The first question says, where does play or design help behavior change the most? Sebastian, can you start?
Hello, I'm Sebastian from Malaysia, and we're going to kick off with our first question for this session. So, I personally believe that design helps behavior change the most through the gamification of things that are inherently not exciting. So, specifically, I'm talking about turning boring geopark conservation into an exciting theme park experience. So if you're not familiar about what geoparks are, so they're areas of geologic specialty, and they're converted into tourism sites. So I believe that to engage a much younger, overstimulated generation, geoparks must adopt the mechanics of gaming. So we can use, for example, augmented reality AR glasses in these future geoparks to have animations of extinct species or animation of movements of geologic faults overlaid on the screen while the tourists look at the rocks. So these AR animations also have other benefits. They allow people to explore restricted or federal zones without causing physical damage. This shows that a slight change in design can have tremendous impact on human behavior. So in this context, by giving tourists an immersive experiences through these things, they're more likely to be inspired and donate more to conservation. So that's my take on it.
That was really great, Sebastian. Maryam, would you like to go next?
Hello, everyone. Hi, Jaanvi. Thank you. I'm Maryam Wangeshi from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm a trained architect, and I'm happy to be here today. So thank you to Teach the Future for convening us. So my take on how play helps behavior, I'm thinking in terms of the broader climate action space. So previously, I have been part of a community where we used sport to advocate for clean air. And what this did is, first of all, since air pollution is something that affects, people down to the grassroots, the communities. If you go and preach about clean air using technical terms, using, charts and scaring people about how air pollution kills us, well, people will be scared, but it really doesn't motivate them to change anything about what they're doing in their day to day. So this is what we call behavioral change, right? And that's what's needed to probably provide a solution to some of these issues. So what we did is we would organize community runs or walks where people join us. And in joining us, we're also collecting air quality data, but we didn't really like make the air quality data collection the big part of that activity. It was more of just come, join us, let's walk, let's run. And at the end of it, you're able to get some refreshments, to network members. And in that walking and running, you're having discussions of how, you're seeing vehicles pass you and the fumes hitting your face, and you discuss about how this is really affecting us and what can we do to improve the air we are breathing. You also walk and see someone using firewood to cook street food, and you start brainstorming about how that is actually affecting the air we are breathing and what can we do about it. So I believe play comes into making an issue, like maybe opening um, the way and opening the path of making an issue relatable to community members, such that they feel it's relatable and it's something they can actually contribute into. Yeah, that's the first thing I can say. And yeah, with time, maybe there's something here and there that I can add in regards to that. Yeah. Thank you, Janvi.
Thank you so much, Mariam and Sebastian, again. I completely agree with whatever you guys have mentioned. So, for me, I think that play and design help behavior change most when they turn sustainability from something people feel guilty about into something they feel involved in, right? That is exactly what Mariam said. When people actually start contributing to the cause that we want to work towards, then they don't feel essentially like bad about it. They just like have a more positive outlook towards it, right? So for me, that starts with making impact visible and participatory. For example, like my organization, Boards for Change, we essentially like hire underrepresented communities to like build a more sustainable future. So essentially, like ex-convicts, women who were ex-convicts, or differently abled individuals participate in activities where they make bags out of billboards and libraries out of billboards, and that like really obviously it's very sustainable, and for them it's like um work, right? So they're actually getting rewarded while contributing to our community. So that like really changes their behavior and their mindset on how to approach work. So earlier, work for them used to be like, oh, okay, I have to do this, and that's why like, and then I'll earn some amount of money and I can like probably sustain myself. But now their work is essentially something which offers them a higher purpose. It helps them obviously like sustain themselves and contribute to something which is like much larger than them as individuals, and towards like a goal that we all like obviously are affected by, goals that we care about, education and sustainability. That's something that we're trying to combine, and that is why I think play and design are really very important while um trying to change the society, helping while you know uh, trying to just create a positive impact. Now we move on to our next question. Uh, where do values and consciousness help shape systems in the long term? Tricia, would you like to share your insights on that?
Thank you. Yes, I'd love to. Hi, my name is Tricia Friedman. I am currently in Ottawa, Canada. It is 4:15 a.m., but I am so excited to learn from you all, to connect with other people who are thinking about the future. My work is primarily in K-12 education, where I'm advocating for schools and educators to understand the power of futures literacy and the necessity of it right now. Before I share my insights on this question, I'd love to open it up to the group. You can share in the chat or feel free to unmute, please. When is the last time, how recently can you remember having given some time over to play? When is the last time you played? Was it yesterday? Was it a few hours ago? Was it weeks? Has it been years for you? If there's anybody that wants to answer that question, again, if you want to share in the chat or if you want to unmute, when is the last time you played? Years, a few weeks? Anybody more recently than that? A month. Every day? Fantastic. It's so interesting, I think, for us to see in the chat that for the majority of us here, that it's not necessarily a daily practice, as somebody has just said, when possible. I often will give the analogy that dogs, or our connection with dogs, is, at least for me, a critical practice of my futures literacy. Because as some of us have said in the chat, younger children often help remind us that this needs to be a daily practice. And I have learned through living and loving dogs that dogs are actually one of the few species on the planet who will value play until the day they die. For the human species, somehow, somewhere along the way, maybe it's in our education, maybe it's in social values of what we deem to be important, we lose that. And this is despite knowing and having so much research about play's benefit for our well-being, for our wellness, as well as, Sebastian, Maryam, Jaanvi, you all mentioned, like, play connects us. Play can be a bridge from person to person. And for me, in my neighborhood, when I first moved to this city a few years ago, the way that I ended up meeting some of my neighbors, people that I literally shared a street with, was because I live with a dog and I had another neighbor who would also be out walking their dog. And so where it maybe was not otherwise like socially possible to just kind of engage in chat, the dogs acted like a bridge. In futures literacy, a lot of people always assume we're just talking about the future, but inevitably we're also talking about the past, right? Our human history is actually founded on having dogs as a companion species. We domesticated the wolf, right? That was part of our survival story tens of thousands of years ago. We changed the wolf, but the wolf also changed us a little bit. And so I think all the time about how we have learned to communicate with wolves and to domesticate them into dogs, and how they remind us to play, but they also help us to think about communication differently. Because as anyone who lives with a dog or has been around dogs a lot knows, you have to really slow down and pay attention. A dog wagging their tail can mean different things. It can mean excitement, but it can also mean fear. And you really have to slow down pay attention, and notice. So for me, I think a lot about how this 1,000-year relationship that we have with dogs can remind us to value play, and that also communication is not just verbal, right? It's sometimes something that we have to just be in our bodies and feel. Maryam, when you were talking about technical terms in your work, sometimes that's a barrier for people to engage. I think sometimes in futures literacy, talking about the future or talking about the past, we have so much history, right? And there's so many possibilities for the world that sometimes we need also other reminders of, well, what are some of the other relationships where we can connect with our history, connect with our past? And for me, that's always been the domestication of the wolf transforming into the dog. Because if you've seen a Chihuahua and if you've seen a wolf, it's incredible that they are part of the same story. So that keeps my mind open to, wow, if we can domesticate a wolf and then all of a sudden we have the Chihuahua, what else is possible? Right? Thank you for listening to my thoughts on that. And my apologies to cat people. Cats also remind us, of course, of what's possible too.
Aziza, would you like to go next? I think you're muted.
Hello, hello,
Yes,
hello.
you're audible. Yes.
Can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yeah.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Aziza Silwimba from Tanzania. I am focused on long-term impacting of parenting and the role of value in society. Parenting perspective, I believe values start at home as we teach our children. Teaching empathy, responsibility, and respect for others can shape the future. Small habit and the daily choices grow into a larger system over time. And the parenting is not just an act. It is a long-term investment change in society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aziza.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tricia and Aziza, for your insights on this question. We now move on to the third and the final question for today. What blocks scaling these ideas into policy or institutions? Who would like to go first?
Yeah, I think I can go first for this one. Okay. So like just now I thought that we didn't have enough time for um me explaining the second part, but I think we have the time right now. So I'm just gonna talk a bit more about the first question. So I stopped a bit on the AR glasses and how we can use gamification to inspire people for geoparks. So one more points I'm going to add is that future geoparks, they have to move away from unreliable donations and government grants, right? So because right now you see there are two types of geoparks. One type is like not recognized, they're not internationally recognized, and the other types are the UNESCO geoparks. So UNESCO geoparks, they're funded, UNESCO pays them money to do the geoparks. And honestly, I would say they're pretty safe on the funding, but the unrecognized geoparks, that's the problem, right? Because anytime someone decides to cut their funding or no one wants to donate to geoparks anymore, then their entire business goes to dust, right? So other than gamification of the geopark itself, I believe that we can have the gamification of and digital tokenization and ownership of the geopark. So visitors, they can earn digital tokens by participating in conservation tasks like identifying signs of erosion or weathering and identifying different types of plants. So these tokens can be then used for park services like access to camping sites or exclusive tours. So they can also exchange these tokens to buy a digital plot of land in the geopark, like an NFT. So unlike traditional donations, this form of ownership represents a commitment to that plot, which is where we link it back to behavior. Because if you just, for example, if you just donate money, if you just give money to the geopark, you're just like, that's a one-time thing. You're just gonna give that money and that's it. But if you own the geopark, which is actually not actually owning, but you're owning a digital copy of that geopark, a token of that geopark, you feel a sense of ownership and a sense of protection to that geopark, right? So I'm gonna move back to the question three. So what are the barriers? What blocks scaling these ideas into policy or institution? So there are a couple of barriers. I've listed down a few. So firstly is that gamification, all these kind of things, they're gonna need a lot of money. So because geoparks, they need maintenance, whatever games, whatever educational games or blockchain technologies that you need to implement for the tokenization and the ownership and all that, they all need data scientists, they all need people to do this. Secondly is knowledge and skill gaps. So for example, you need to work on the we need to work on the user interfaces, make sure that these things not get overly complicated. We also have the regulatory and ethical uncertainty about this. So because what means like owning a digital copy of a geopark, right? So, and we shouldn't be financializing nature in the first place, right? But those are just ethical concerns, but there are more benefits to that. Lastly is screen fatigue and accessibility gap if we because geoparks they're meant to be nature reserves, they're meant to be these havens of nature in our society. So when we add all these AR glasses and all that, it may be a distraction from a physical nature connection. And not only that, but there are privacy concerns over user data. So those are my barriers. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. Who would like to go next? Okay, Aziza, can you go next? Okay, I believe that Maryam can go next and then we can move on to Aziza.
Okay. Thank you, Jaanvi. And yeah, I agree with Sebastian's insights. And yeah, I'll also like to shout out Tricia. I really liked that analogy of, the dog and yeah. So it's just built on that point of why these ideas are not scaling to the institutions that create policy, maybe just thinking out loud, institutions being places of rigidity and systems that carry out what has been done time and time again. There's a long history of how things have been done in these institutions. And, in the diplomacy space, it's better to stick to tradition of how policy is created and influenced, but it is promising how participatory forms of shaping policy are starting to be integrated into these systems. So while public participation is, just normally a checkbox. For example, in Kenya, when a bill is being shaped, there will be a process of, how it goes from the members of parliament before it reaches the cabinet and the executive signature. There is a checkbox for public participation. You just call people to a hall, have them air their views, but it's more so formality. It doesn't really account to anything at some point if you're looking at it critically. But especially in Kenya with what happened with the Gen Z and how people saw young people are actually invested in these policies and they're invested in being part of the process, I see change in people being more serious about participatory democracy, having citizen assemblies that actually shape policy. So, for example, in Nairobi, last year we had a citizens' assembly on clean air. And what this means is it's not just public participation of one person talking, the other listening. So it's a one-way communication. It was more of we all listen to each other. We have the policy makers in the room, we have the technical experts in the room, we have community members in the room, and it's a dialogue, because if we are being honest, these policies benefit the policymakers that we always think we are fighting in trying to change policy, right? Because they live in the same city we are fighting for better air, for example. So having more participatory democracy spaces really will change how policy is shaped, and it's more of dialogue and not one way. So that's one, and maybe yeah, that's a block. Having more rigid systems, and if is there any other block I see? Maybe the hope aspect as well. People have seen before, really, all these are formalities and nothing changes at the end. But if we maybe cultivate more activities that promote hope, the feeling of hope as an infrastructure, having people know they actually have a voice that accounts to some change. It's not all lost at the end. Yeah, those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maryam. I completely agree. Tricia, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you, Maryam. To build on what you just shared, what you said about tradition really resonates with me. And I think there is a lot to be gained by slowing down and asking the necessary question whenever we're talking about tradition for who, right? And for me personally, the idea of having futures literacy be a bigger part of education and understanding that play is a critical part of that is directly connected to what I see as our crisis of imagination. I think what's blocking a lot of the initiatives that we've been talking about in this hour is that we are not necessarily giving enough time to creativity, imagination, and play. And I think a part of that is even saying, okay, well, what do we mean when we say play? When I asked everybody to share, like, when is the last time you played? Some people said a long time. Others said every day, it's a daily practice. But this is assuming we all have the same definition of or for play, which is not likely to be true. So I want to pause here and invite people to share in the chat again. When you think about play at this point in your life, if you imagine we get off this call and we're going to give just 10 minutes to the kind of play that you love to do, what does that look like? What does that mean to you? If we were going to take 10 minutes for your daily play practice, what would you be doing? What would you want to do with those 10 minutes? Well, we would be having a dance party. Apparently, I love that. So from that chat, you can see for some folks, play might be very physical. It's movement based. For others, the play is about connecting or making or thinking. There are so many different styles of play. And I would love to see us at every level when we're talking about education, looking at how much time are we dedicating to play, and Aziza, who is talking about parenting, how are we helping parents and caregivers understand the significance and importance of play, that there's so much research around it being genuinely good for us. And at the other end, thinking about what we are doing to engage across generations of play. Where are the spaces in our community for intergenerational play, like this experience right now? I began with the question of when is the last time you played? And I want to leave this section for me with one last question in the chat. When is the last time, apart from this moment right now, that you were in a space that was intergenerational by design? It was intentionally looking to bridge people of various generations. When was the last time you were a part of something like that, where, again, they said intentionally, on purpose, we want to make sure that people of different generations are together doing something? Thank you, folks, for sharing your response. I can feel, even just with like the bigger pause, we have to think back further, right? But what if, again, play and intergenerational connection? I think if those things were an ongoing value, part of our consciousness, some of our ideas here would scale faster.
Thank you so much, Tricia, for your response. So for me, like I believe that what really blocks scaling is not creativity or commitment, but alignment, right? So in our session, we talked about how turning everyday experiences into future-ready systems is very important. Now, the difficulty arises when problems are interconnected, right? Decision making is often not interconnected. it. So what I mean to say by that is that, like, for example, I'm trying to solve three problems via one solution, but like the government only has, like, the government aligns with only one of those goals, right? So they would essentially not fund my project, and they would essentially like look for projects that like completely align with those goals of the government or any organization that essentially like funds social initiatives or impact projects, right? They would look for something very clear, something which is not risky, something that is comparatively safer, something which is not very out of the blue, something which is not extraordinary. They look for like safer options, which is why I feel like creativity often gets lost. And we always come up with like these low intellect solutions. Obviously, like there are a lot of solutions that are very high intellect and like are creating a lot of positive change in the society. But again, funding, like at least in my case, is something that I believed was like a major barrier in scaling, because like for us we need those funds, right? And then like I had to request my parents for funding and stuff, and like even making my parents understand the importance of funding and how like these impact initiatives are very important for us was quite a task for me, especially like coming from India, wherein like people don't understand how community-led projects can really like create a big impact on our society, right? I feel like it's like awareness. Yes, awareness is there. All of us, like, try to create awareness and it does reach people, but it does not like affect them to a level that they would actually sit and do something about it, or they would join your cause, or they would like probably fund it. I feel like that change in that, like the creation of that change in mindset is something which like really prevents all of us from scaling our ideas and turning them into like real policies. That's my take on that. I think if any of you have like any more insights to like share on any of these questions that we just discussed, or anything in general, I think you can now unmute or like share it in the chat, or if you have any questions for any of us, please feel free to reach out or ask questions right now itself.
So maybe as people are thinking about what you've just said, I think it's also important to start by why should we care about the future? Like, why are we here today? And I don't know, I would like to leave it open to everyone because we once did a foresight training, and that was we once did, yeah, we were doing actually it was the citizens assembly that I mentioned, and we were trying to look at what Nairobi will look like in 2052. And we asked the question, why would I care about what Nairobi will look like in 2052? I'll be whatever age I am. I won't say the age here, but why should I care? At that time, maybe I'll be retiring. I'll leave the climate action to young people. So why should I care about it? And that's where the question of foresight came in. So I'd just like to hear like thoughts in the chat randomly, or you can unmute yourself. Like, why should you care about the future? Like, why? Yeah. Jaanvi, what do you think?
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, could you repeat that? My network was like lost for a second.
Oh, I was asking, like, why should you care about the future? Oh, I see Renat raising her.
Renwood,
So,
would you like to? Yeah.
so I would like to answer Mariam's question. Why should we care about the future? I think we should care about the future because the decision we make today shape the conditions we and others will live in tomorrow. The future is not separate from us. It's the result of our current actions, systems, and priorities. Ignoring it means accepting consequences we may not be prepared for. Caring about the future also means caring about sustainability, stability, and opportunity. whether in education, institutions, communities, or innovation. Long-term thinking helps prevent crisis, reduce risks, and create lasting impact instead of short-term results. Most importantly, future-focused thinking reflects responsibility. It ensures that progress today does not limit the choices, well-being, or potential of the next generation. Thank you.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for that. And yeah, it's now like creates a debate like you have to be very you have to have the humanity and the selflessness to care about the future generation so that you can protect and safeguard the resources today. And yeah, I think that's why foresight really is a huge part of sustainability. Sorry, that's my call to prayer. But yeah, thank you so much, Maryam, for sharing.
Yeah, right. So I completely agree with what Mariam said. I feel like we should have that sense of humanity in us. Like I was just about to mention that, right? Um, I know that like we all look at those metrics that there are 4 million children in the world without like access to education. Now that's like a really big number, and some might it might help somebody um understand like the complexity and the um immensity of like these social problems, right? But for me personally, like I've seen poverty and struggle like up very close in my city. Like I'm from Varanasi, India. It's like India in itself. Like I've seen so many people struggle, and that for me personally, it just evokes this sense of like guilt and humanity, and I just like really have this drive to do something just by looking at their faces, or just by like looking at their stories, listening to them. Like I had one of these seniors who was working with sex workers, right? So she was trying to like make the world a more dignified place for them. And to research more about them, she went to this red light district area, and there she saw how they were treated. And she told me these all of these like heartbreaking stories about them. And I feel like, to me, like all of these stories, like even if it's just one single person who's going through that entire struggle, be it any problem which is affecting them, it like really affects me on a personal level. And that's why I feel like we should like really care about the future, because it's just plain humanity, and I just feel like all of us have that embedded in us, like it's there. We just have to channel it in a more positive manner.
I completely agree with Mariam and Jaanvi what they said. Yeah, and I believe that why we should all care about the future is because that we're all human. We're humans. We're not robots. We have empathy. We care about people that need help. When we see a drowning child, we're gonna have to save the drowning child. So whether it's the drowning child of the future or the present. So yeah, I totally agree with them.
Also, I just wanted to mention that like I'm really grateful for all of my co-facilitators, right? Tricia is awake at 4 a.m. Mariam and Aziza were having connectivity issues. Sebastian like really shared a great insight. So and Yasmine, who's not present here, however, like she really contributed to our session, right, in terms of our understanding and the questions that we came up with. So just like I'm really grateful to all of you, and it was great like getting to know all of you all.
I just want to echo that sentiment. And it's a powerful reminder. I thank my co-facilitators as well as Teach the Future in reminding us, maybe even to answer that question of why should we care about the future? We are connected. It's just a matter, I think, of reminding ourselves now and then to come together, to have these conversations, to think about our capacity. Sebastian, as you were saying, our human empathy, as well as our creativity and our wide variety of skills and perspectives, bringing them together, getting that on the schedule more often, perhaps, than we are doing, And for me, it's also, this is why we've crafted the tools that we have, like Zoom, to make an event like this possible. But also to remember that one of our most critical technologies is story. Story building, narrative building is something that we have had since the origin of our species. And so just taking the time to listen to one another's stories and experiences is very, very powerful. So thanks to my facilitation team. Thank you to Teach the Future for reminding us of that today.
Thank you so much, this team. Thank you for coming together. Jaanvi, Maryam, Aziza, Tan, Tricia. What a great subject. What a great title. Because the future is everywhere. It's in everything, right? So when you picked play. You picked talking about going back to playing, even in the hard subjects, finding play with each other, and it's a fun one. This was a fun one. The other session, that was a hard one. Theirs was on trust, how to dismantle trust in the future, or not dismantle, but talk about trust. And there's many layers there. So this talking about the future, there's so many entry points. And I don't think people know that until we start talking about it. And not a lot of young people are talking about it because there's not a space to talk about it. And so, Tricia, really appreciate what you're doing in schools. Would love to know more. Lots of colleagues in Canada in that in your location. So thank you. And the youth in the room, thank you for contributing your voice. I know that I think we're a bit early. And what can I say about us being early? We have about 10 minutes, and the choices are we can use up the space in here for the next 10 minutes. We can also leave the room. So I can just do the outro script, but before I do the outro script, is there any thoughts or reactions, questions? And if you are speaking, you're on mute.
I do have a question. So how do we keep this going? We don't just like sit here and discuss all the possibilities and we just, it just ends here. It's like, oh well, that was 1 hour well spent on Sunday, but that's it. So how do we keep this going, the momentum from this session? Yeah.
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Maryam, that's the question I ask. I ask that question. How do we keep this going? I always ask that when I go to professional developments and we do an aha presentation and we do this moment of learning that's so great. And then the PD's over, the professional development's over, and then we all go our own separate ways. And then we go back to the same, either it's a silo, right? Either we go back to our own silos and our own way of working. And we only come together for that one PD. So I'm glad you asked the question. I always ask that question. So if I have to answer it, I would say in spaces. So the first session today at World Futures Day, because I like to find the connection, the weaving together the sessions. The first session was talking about third spaces and what is everyone's third space. And if you didn't have context to what a third space is, I'm gonna do my best to share. Third spaces are where you feel comfortable, where it's not necessarily your home. It could be school. Typically, mostly third spaces are after school, right? Because in school it's pretty regimented. You go to class, you learn XYZ, but the third space is a place where you can actually have these conversations, and it's also a safe space. For some, that could be a church or a place to pray, as I think someone in the chat box said earlier. And Teach the Future could we had our youth council, so a group of youth shared in our second session, and a lot of them were saying that this feels safe. It feels like home. It's not school. It's a place where they can just talk freely and hear their thoughts. So at Teach the Future, we do talk about the future. We learn about futures literacy and we teach it to youth, where futures literacy is mostly taught at the graduate school level. It's mostly taught at universities, and you can get a degree in it. But what about prepping youth before they get to the universities? So middle school, high school, primary, secondary schools, preparing them so that they don't have to jump into the university and learn about it there. And all of you here are preview to that. And it's still so new and growing. That's why it's hard. It's a challenge to keep these conversations going, particularly conversations about the future. Yeah. I hope that sits. I don't know if there's any thoughts or reactions. I'll say I'll pause. Tricia, did you come off mic? Was there anything,
I
thoughts?
did. Yeah, I mean, the other part I think is the critical component of access. I really appreciate this event, bringing people together, giving the full day of opportunity for folks to tap in a wide variety of menus. And so I think it's also on us to think about what opportunities are we providing, what third spaces are we maybe providing in order to continue the conversation. I'll leave in the chat. So I'm looking a lot, Sebastian, you had mentioned we're human beings, we have empathy, we're not robots. And of course, increasingly, we're living and learning in a world where there are more robots, and there are now robots and AI that's pretending to have empathy. So I think we need to talk about, what does this mean for the future of friendship? I'll leave in the chat if anybody wants to join or can join. I'm hosting actually a 90-minute conversation to use futures literacy to understand that. As my way of thanking TTF, there's an optional donation you can make to join that if you would like. So I'll be sharing that with my network as my, commitment to keeping conversations like these going, because as our group has said, it will not happen unless we action it. So I think if you feel passionately about the future, you have to make that commitment to say, all right, well, how are we bringing more people to the table? How are we expanding the table for more dialogue and more conversation?
Thank you, Tricia, for sharing. I've got it saved. And so as we wrap up this inspiring session, thank you all for being part of World Futures Day. Young voices, your perspectives and participation have made this conversation truly meaningful. And the journey doesn't end here. Here we go. New facilitators and fresh conversations begin at the top of each hour. You are welcomed to stay and continue exploring future possibilities with us. And with Tricia at a later time. Tricia will keep this as well going. Check out the link in the chat box. Some quick announcements. If you enjoyed this kind of learning, it doesn't stop here. It continues through Teach the Future's global online youth futures community. Right now, we're offering the following learning experience. It's called Campaigns for Change, which builds award-winning projects using futures literacy skills. So join the Young Voices FutureWise Institute. We apply these learnings directly to your active projects and future initiatives. And as part of World Futures Day, there's a special discount code to register. And if you're not ready to take part in the learning experience yet, you can still stay connected by joining the Young Voices Network, a global community